Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Joanne. Thank you for making time to come on the show, Joanne. I know that we're going to share a very interesting perspective, and that's going to become clear when Joanne introduces herself. But before we do that, hello. Let's pretend that we haven't just been talking for 5 minutes before we started.
Yeah. Hello, Simon. Nice to see you and chat with you again.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Joanne?
Yeah. My name is Joanna Ivey. I am an adult adoptee from the baby scoop era. I'm also an adoptive mom of a 17-year-old, and we have a 20-year-old biological son. And I've worked in the field of adoption for around 16 years. The work that we do, the business I own is called Our Chosen Child, and we work with hopeful adoptive parents in creating their adoption profiles. So expectant parents who are considering adoption review adoption profiles, get to know hopeful adoptive parents, and if they like what they see, they connect, they move on, perhaps they match, perhaps it works out.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the work that I do is that I connect with several hundred adoptive families at this really unique juncture in their adoption. They've decided to adopt. They're working with an agency or attorney here in the United States, and then they come to me for really this collaborative process of creating their adoption profiles. In the work that I do, speaking with all of these adoptive parents, there are a lot of similarities, a lot of threads in what the adoptive parents, hopeful adoptive parents, tell me about their stories. And one of the biggest ones is that they feel called to adopt. And as an adoptee, I find that really problematic. And when I work with families, I have those discussions with them about what it means to me as an adoptee when I hear called to adopt. And I was really glad to speak with you because while I can talk to all of my clients individually, this show really gives me a larger platform to share with more people why I believe that's so problematic.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. We have, the purpose of the show is to bring different perspectives, because I believe that the most useful thing in my life has been when I have had a change
Yes.
of my perspective. And that has often been brought about by hearing somebody else's perspective. So I want to bring as many perspectives to our listeners' attention as we possibly can. And I, when I found you and we had this conversation, an adult adoptee who is also an adoptive mum and a bio mum, I thought, this is going to be gold. This is going to be gold because you've got three different perspectives.
Yes.
Three different perspectives internally. And you've also got the fourth perspective, I guess, as all the stuff that you've learned in your dealings with prospective adoptive parents. So this is fascinating for me because I'd never had that thought myself. I have thought about, I have spoken to people that have said they felt that they felt that they were called to adopt, but it hadn't set the alarm bells ringing for me like it clearly does for you. Why does this set the alarm bells ringing for you?
Well, for a few different reasons. When people say they are called to adopt, first of all, where that comes from for me, when we come to adoption, and by we, I mean adoptive parents. Sometimes I speak we as adoptees, and sometimes I speak we as
Yeah.
adoptive parents. But when we as adoptive parents come to adoption, it is often because we are broken through infertility, through, for us, the loss of a child, through miscarriage, or for same-sex parents, they also come broken, often knowing that there are a lot of people in the world that don't think they should adopt. So we come to adoption on our knees. And feeling like you're called to adopt all of a sudden takes the pain and the loss, and it repackages that into a positive story where all of a sudden we are the heroes, that we are not defined by our loss, but we are heroes to do something for somebody else. And it's a convenient package. It's a convenient bow to put on the package to say, we are called to this greater mission, that our loss has been for something. And at the surface, that's really lovely, right? That there's been a reason for our grief and our loss, and it's this kind of beautiful calling that we have. But if you dive beneath that, if you skip right from your pain to this beautiful package, what you are missing is really, really dealing with your grief and your loss and your anger. And when you skip that healing, you are not whole as a person, and you are not whole as a parent, and especially as a parent to an adopted child who really comes into this with their own narrative. You've got to get over your own narrative first. And when you skip right to being called to adopt, you don't do that work. And second of all, going along with feeling called to adopt is the idea that this was meant to be, that your journey was meant to be a parent through adoption. And to me, I find that as an adoptee, incredibly dismissive of what's on the other side of that equation of meant to be. Because if you were meant to be a parent through adoption, that means the birth parents meant to be in their situation, that their loss, their grief, their anguish was meant to be to fulfill the hole that's in you, the adoptive parents. I don't know of a world, and I don't want to live in a world where someone else's pain is meant to be to fulfill my longing to be a parent. When I met my birth mother as an adult, she shared with me that she was raped. And that was my conception. And she moved, not telling her parents, in the shame, and she moved to California to place me for adoption. When I met her, I learned that more than the rape, it was placing me for adoption that caused her really lifelong trauma and anguish. 2 years ago, I met, through DNA testing, my birth father's family. And through that, I learned that my birth grandmother was raped. And my birth father was conceived in that rape. So if my adoptive parents had told me the story that I was meant to be in their family, what does that say about a God or a universe that would have generational trauma and rape to fulfill my parents' longing to be parents?
Wow. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. This perspective is, we touched on it last time, but the simplicity and the eloquence that you put this in, I'm thinking this is blowing my mind. It's not often I'm lost for words. Normally I'll say something and I'll come back with I'll have a question and a follow up on this. Only one thing comes to my mind, and as I say it to my head, in my head, it feels disrespectful. It kind of feels disrespectful, but I don't know whether that's true or not. I can kind of see your logic. Are you taking it too far? Sorry, I'm finding it difficult to ask that question because I don't want to. I clearly don't want to cause you any distress or insult you in any way whatsoever. So if I am doing, then I'll think of something else to ask, or you can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I think it's rare for people to have the experience that I have had in learning about my conception. But even without what I've learned about my lineage, I think being called to adopt and it being meant to be, that is disrespectful to expectant parents and birth parents. Because, for one, by saying it was meant to be, it removes responsibility and agency from everyone in the triad. And it is an adoptive parent-centric narrative. Birth parents, after they have placed, do not walk away feeling like my trauma, my loss, my grief for the rest of my life was meant to be to make this family whole. I would challenge you to find a birth parent that spends their life thinking, well, that was a good thing. That was meant to be. But it is adoptive parents and agencies and attorneys who control the narrative. They are the ones with the advertising dollars, the websites. They put out the messaging. That's where the money is. The money is not in telling birth parent stories. So the narrative that you hear, and if you type call to adopt in Google, you're going to find pages and pages and pages and pages, often religious themed websites, supporting adoptive families in their calling. So I'm happy to provide the counter narrative.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hear pushback. But I think that's the unsaid, connect the dots. If it was meant to be for you, what's on the other side of that equation? What was meant to be for them? I think it is okay to say, I want to adopt because I really, really, really want to be a parent. And I'm not able to be for whatever reason. And I really, really, really want to adopt and have the experience of raising a child. That's okay. That's fine. You don't need to move on to, I'm saving someone.
Okay, I can get that. I can get that. What happened? What if people are in that mindset, in that they're still thinking called to adopt? What impact do you see on the dynamic of the family afterwards? What are the dangers of this? How does this play out?
Yeah, and that's really my point in wanting to have this discussion, because as an adoptee, well, I will say no one wants to feel like they were a charity case. No one wants to feel like they were saved, that they have to be grateful for what should be our birthright. I grew up with a brother and sister who were biological to my parents, and I was the only adoptee. I shouldn't have to feel grateful to be raised in the family where I was raised. And I had a great childhood. I had a great life. And by saving a child, it really sets up a hierarchy of the savior and the savee. It's a great narrative if you're the savior, that feels good, but who wants to be the savee? And what are we being saved from? So it is said that we are all children of our grandmothers, that in our grandmother's womb, as our mother was being formed, the eggs in her body are already fully developed. So half of our DNA was already complete while we were in our grandmother's womb. So if we are being saved from our birth family, what does that say about who we are as adoptees? Because we are our mothers and we are our grandmothers and we are the generations before us. You cannot transplant adoptees and think that we are a tabula rasa, because we are not. We are already perfectly formed in our mothers and our grandmothers' wombs. By saying you are saving us from those women, that's us.
Yeah. Wow. Picking up on your grateful thing, I see this quite a lot.
I do too.
And I saw some kids, adopted teens, talking about adoption, and they were irritated to frustrated to anger about the way the world sees them.
Yes.
And I had a question. A question went through my mind after I saw that video: is, did the mentor that arranged the video shoot, did that mentor talk about how, well, I've heard it said in other circumstances, other people's opinion of us is nobody's business, is not our business. This isn't adoption. I'm not talking about adoption specifically, but if we are waiting, if we, whoever we are, whether it's adoptees or another group, if we are waiting for the world's opinion to change of us, then we're going to be waiting a very long time. And if other people's opinion of us is disempowering us, as it seemed to be to me in this adoption, then it didn't seem to be a great place. That didn't seem to be great. Now, those kids seem to be victims because they cared about what other people think of them. And to me, that's not great. What do you make of that?
I would come back to my central point. As adoptees, or really anyone with trauma or life experience, when someone else controls the narrative, so when your adoptive parents control the narrative, it doesn't allow you to fully express and feel and be supported in your really messy range of emotions. When you don't set your own narrative and it's being, created for you, and it's the adoptive parent narrative, the child doesn't have the opportunity to feel angry. The child doesn't have the opportunity to feel shame, to feel, the full range of human emotions. And unless we, from a very young age, we being adoptees, can express those, to have them validated, to be reassured, to be loved when we bring these messy emotions, unless we are able to control our own narrative, whatever that might be, and it changes over the course of a lifetime, then you do begin to look externally to see how the world views you. Because you've lost that ability to know your own feelings and to feel supported and loved through your own, kind of journey through trauma. Then you do look externally. And that's why it's so important for adoptive parents coming to adoption and parenting adoptive kids to have worked through their own trauma, and then to let the experience of raising an adopted child be about the child. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense to me. And that bit that you talked about 10-15 minutes ago about skipping, going straight from trauma,
yes, losses,
traumatized survivor,
yes,
to savior, and not giving the time, giving giving us, not giving themselves time to heal.
yes.
And I can see that as very dangerous. I get all that. I get all that. And there's no but coming. I get all that. And because healing takes time and time and different amounts of time, I guess. For me, healing comes actually in a series of discrete moments.
Yes.
So
yeah.
the bus may take time to arrive. I use this analogy a lot. The bus may take time, a long time, to leave the depot to get to the bus stop, but it's always, because we don't know how far this bus, we don't know how far this metaphorical bus stop, we don't know how far that bus depot is away from it, but it always takes 20 seconds to do those last 20 yards when it's come around the corner. Healing happens to me in discrete moments, but there's no timetable for it. That's where the bus stop analogy kind of runs out, because all buses are running on a timetable, whereas Insight doesn't have a timetable whatsoever. So until sufficient insights have happened into to allow us to heal, then we're still too raw and or in denial, or wherever we are, we're not ready for anything. I remember a loss that my best friend died in a car crash 21 years ago, and a guy that worked for me said a couple of years afterwards, he said, your head was mush for 6 months.
Yeah.
After that happened.
Yeah.
So I can see that. I can see that. I can see that danger. Does this savior mentality, does it persist? To what extent does it persist? To what extent does it persist? To what extent do you, I mean, you know, I'm trying to put it's like I'm trying to put numbers on something that is clearly, but how often is it something that frequently persists, or do you see it changing, or how does it?
I think it's really prevalent. I think it's incredibly prevalent.
And it's
especially, yeah, when you look at around more than half of the agencies, adoption agencies, operating in the United States are religious-based agencies. And that's a really, really common narrative.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't ask the question very well. I was saying, does it persist in you know, for the lifespan of the adoption? It's kind of, I mean, you know, do people come in? Do parents come into it as saviors, and then this the savior the savior complex wanes like a moon wanes over time, or, you know, do you see it persisting? Is it, what does it look like?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that in a couple of ways. You know, first, I think, you know, our adopted kids, you know, always want to know our origin story. And from a very young age, we've talked to our son about his origin story. And I think in the very beginning, when you hear that narrative repeated again and again and again, we felt called to adopt. You know, that becomes embedded in your very first telling of your origin story. And secondly, when people share with their family and their friends and their church community about their calling to adopt, everyone who hears that narrative then says, you know, oh, you're so fabulous, you're great, you're doing such a great thing. But where does that leave the adoptee? In all of their minds, the adoptee will be the saved one. Aren't you lucky? Aren't you so lucky that you were the one who was saved? So that narrative does become really entrenched in how we are treated by our larger community.
Okay. Yeah.
And then also it's such a pretty package, you know. You see it in TV, you see it in commercials, you see it in advertising, you see it in adoptee stories, you know, that you see on the news. So it does become really a fundamental part, even when you move on in parenting and the busyness of life and you love your kid, it's still a really fundamental part of the story.
Yeah. So my question wasn't the right question at all, was it? Because
I apologize.
No. So hey, no, my question. Oh, hey up. Yeah, you've got two dogs going a little bit. Two dogs going. Just pleased to see somebody at the door.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. our dogs often interrupt me as well, so it's totally okay.
Okay.
This is welcome to real life, listeners.
Yeah.
This is one of the things for working from home. So the question wasn't the right question to ask, but it got us to where we wanted to be, which is essentially it doesn't really matter if it persists or not, because it clearly does persist, but the potency with which it is shared from the outset means that the child is going to be raised in that. They're going to be pickled. They're pickled in that belief, in that belief system. So it doesn't really matter if it wanes over time, because the early stuff is going to be, but it's going to come. It's going to persist, isn't it?
And then I think it really does come back, especially as adoptees get older, in the teenage years, when we get married, when we are families, and we have this really intense curiosity about our birth families, about our roots. And if the narrative is we were saved, right, that we were taken from someplace worse to someplace better, that leaves us feeling like, would my adoptive parents, who I adore, support me in searching for my birth family? Right? What are their feelings? What are their thoughts going to be? Am I ungrateful if I search for my roots, when I've been told that my roots, I had to be saved from that, right? What does that say about our birth families? And knowing our birth families can often be really fundamental to knowing ourselves fully. And I had a great life. I was raised with a great family. I adored my family, but there was always a longing to know my birth family. And I think that's very true for a lot of adoptees. And my experiences knowing my birth family has been really mixed, some good, some not so good. But it's my story, and I own it. And that's fundamental to who I am.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about my mum and dad and whether this savior thing was ever, whether I picked up on that. No, I don't think so. I don't. I was chosen, and was I chosen? I don't know. I really can't remember. We didn't talk about it a lot. Things have clearly changed completely in the last 54 years, and I still think the Americans are ahead of you guys are ahead of us in terms of openness to the UK, and you're also culturally, we're the stiff upper lip guys. When you talk about expressing our emotions, a denial of not being allowed to express our emotions earlier and all that sort of stuff, then that would be that wouldn't be a very British perspective on it, especially for people my mum and dad's age.
Yeah.
Whether it would be for, like, even for our friends, my wife and I's friends who've got kids, whether that would be a thing for them, I'm not sure. So there's a cultural thing there as well. If this is a seeing thing, though, yeah. So this isn't a strategy thing. This is a seeing thing. This is an invitation to adoptive parents listening to look at their motivations? Is it what is it? Is it
really to taking their own journeys to wrestle with their grief and their loss and come to adoption as whole participants who are willing to let process be a child-centric process,
yeah,
not an adoptive parent-centric process.
yeah,
You're along for your child's ride,
yeah,
right? It's about them
it's about that.
and their journey and their narrative and their feelings, not yours.
Yeah. I've something else has popped into my head as I was thinking, well, what about an adoptee perspective? And I'm not sure how this will play, but I'll just say it's so I'm not a religious guy. I'm not like a Jesus guy or a Buddha guy or a Muhammad guy. I'm not into that. I would count myself as being interested in practical spirituality and philosophy and the identity. That's how I would, and I would identify us as spirit. I would say, there's a French guy that says we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. So I that's, we are spiritual beings, shortening that down to we are spirit, and that's the camp that I'm in. I'm in the we're spirit camp. A lot of people get swept along by the camps that they're in. Me too. Yeah, I get swept along by that camp, and people get swept along by the religious camp. So I'm going to just put this out there. If you're an adoptee listening to this, and you feel that your parents were kind of on that, were like this with you, and you felt disempowered for it because of it, and it was to do with them being swept along by their religion, then maybe you could cut them some slack, because we do get, like me too, I get caught, I get carried along by my gang. So does that make any sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I think with maturity and life experience, we can come to that place. And it's, I have experience with mental health issues. And my father committed suicide when I was 15.
Yep.
And after years of, grief and anger, I have come to a place where I understand how desperately sad he must have been. And my overarching feeling is compassion. For adoptees, we can come to that place where we feel compassion for the losses that our adoptive parents had and the broken way that they came to this process. But I would offer, it is not the child's job to do that. It is the parent's job to create a world where the child doesn't have to take that journey. The parents need to be whole for the child.
Yeah.
That is fundamental to being a parent.
Yeah. Wow. This is one interesting and challenging, but I can see all that. I talked on recent podcast about Wayne Dyer, but but before that, I mean, that you were 15 when your dad committed suicide, so tricky. What can you say? You know, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So, have you read any Wayne Dyer books? You heard of this guy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, especially in my kind of earlier years. Yeah.
Yeah. I once had a meltdown on a train reading one of his books about mind control, which I thought was very interesting. The fact I had a meltdown while I was reading, a meltdown with a fellow passenger on the train, who was talking very loudly on his phone. But he went from psychological to spiritual as he got older, I think. But he talks. Have you heard the story about him going to his father? So his father ran away, neglected, absconded, whatever it is, left his mum to raise the kids, Wayne and his Wayne and his siblings. Have you heard the story about Wayne Dyer finding his father's grave and going to pee on it?
Yeah, I have. But do you want to share that so that everyone else has the context?
So it's if you've not watched it, it's on YouTube somewhere. So Wayne Dyer's interviewed us. It's a very strange set of circumstances leads him to his father's grave, and he goes there and he has gone there to pee on the grave and he rants at his father's. He rants at his father's graveside for 2 hours, doesn't pee on it, doesn't pee on the grave, and then has a spontaneous forgiveness for his father, and that sets him, as he describes it, that kind of sets him free. His life takes off when he is unburdened of his hatred for his dad. And he didn't go on a course to do that. He didn't go to the grave intending to do that. He didn't draw up a 5-point strategy. He didn't say affirmations into the mirror about forgiving his dad. In his anger, something had happened. He had a spontaneous moment of forgiveness when the forgiveness of, and that was the basis for his compassion for his father. And people talk about, anger towards others or anger towards the past. About people say it's like bearing a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yes.
So for me, this is at the core. If we can give ourselves an easier time, great. And if we can give other people that we feel have wronged us an easier time, then we'll have an easier time too.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And perhaps it could be said spiritually, that's the evolution that we hope we all have as humans, right? To understand that most of us living in this world are broken in some way, and to have compassion for that when we find it in others, and especially when we find it in ourselves.
Yeah. Do you think spirits can be broken?
Our own spirit, the spirit that lives within us. That's a great question. For adoption, I don't see adoption as the fundamental trauma that breaks a child. I think it's fundamental to who we are, but I don't think it's something that inherently breaks our spirit.
So I've got a bit of I've got a bit of a counter cultural take on this, right? So I believe we're spirit, right? If we're spirit, we're not a thing, like, because spirit's like the wind. So you can't break it. You can't break spirit because it's not a thing, and only things can be broken.
I think people are often broken by life. I look at my father and the circumstances that led up to his suicide. I don't think that was a feeling of his spirit, but life broke him.
Yeah.
And I hope his spirit is free. But I think life can be pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a contact sport, as they say.
Yeah.
Life's a contact sport.
Yeah.
But we're spiritual beings having a human experience. The contact sport bit, the challenges are all in that human experience part of the
Yeah.
experience part of the sentence.
Great. And I will say that some of my experiences um, have really made me, who I am, the mother, the friend, the spouse, the person that goes through life treating others with compassion. I think I've had a unique set of experiences, and I've been blessed with resilience, and I'm glad of where I am now.
Yeah.
My message is really for adoptive parents: don't add this burden to your child, right?
Yeah.
Pave the way, do your own difficult work to make the life of the child easier,
Yeah.
right? Because life's going to hand them enough, right?
Yeah. Have you got any suggestions on that doing that stuff that
I'm
you found works?
doing the work of grief.
Well, doing the work. So yeah, doing the work of grief, or doing any work that you believe is, because you're an adopted parent. I'm not. So I'm trying to give you the scope to share anything about any pointers that you can give the listeners on doing their work, doing their grief work, or doing any other sort of work that will put their family in the best place for to thrive as a family unit, not their child to thrive and them to thrive, the whole thing.
Boy, well, that's a really big question, and I think
It is.
there could be there could be hundreds of answers to that for everyone's different situations. But I think the really fundamental thing to start with is understanding that there's work to be done, to not skip the work. For us, the work was dealing with the loss of a child, dealing with infertility, and we went through grief workshops. I was seeing a therapist. I journaled like crazy. That was my path. But I think for everyone, it's different. But again, it just begins with understanding that the work is there to be done. And if it's not done, it's not over. You can't skip over that and think that it's not going to affect you in your life and in your very fundamental role as a parent. So knowing that the work is there to be done and getting on with it.
Yeah.
When we first lost our son, for months I felt like I couldn't even turn to face the grief because I thought I would never come out the other side whole. I was so afraid to start that process because I felt like once I walked into the fire, I'd be completely consumed by it. And the opposite was true, of course, that once I did stand in the fire long enough, I was able to come out the other side more whole than when I walked into it. But I was terrified to start that journey.
Yeah. Wow. As you say, there's so many ways through it. So maybe the next thing is find the work that works.
Absolutely. Right.
You know?
And it's probably not a straight line, as you were saying, right? It will come up at different times in your life and in different ways, and different methods will work for you at different times in your life. But find the work that works for you and be intentional about it.
Yeah. So I saw some. I've had a lot of coaching in my life, and had a lot of coaches, and they've, to varying degrees, they've helped me along the way. But they all wanted to help me on the way. When I found, and all being very open, I looked for some therapists about 6 or 7 years ago, because I wanted to do more work, and I have to say that it didn't work for me. That the particular ones I found didn't work for me. So I found some other work. I found another way through it. I didn't just think, oh well, that's it. It's not for me. I was intentional or persistent or belligerent, whichever word you persistent, unremitting or stubborn, which or all of the above.
And there are certainly, here in the States we call them adoption competent therapists, and that's a great place to start. I know several years ago, I was working with a therapist and just beginning the relationship, and was sharing about our family structure. And he said of our son who was adopted, oh, he's got to be so grateful. He's so lucky. And I just held out my hand and said, wow, we have to stop right there. And I tried to explain to him, our son doesn't need to feel lucky or grateful. We are blessed because he's here. And he, argued with me or tried to share his narrative. And, and that was it. I really, well, if I have to teach my therapist, what am I paying him for? Yeah. So that was it, because I knew that, this was a time when I was really in my journey of reunion and learning some really difficult truths about, my birth family and, conception. that, wow, this is really a horrible fit. Because if he feels this way about my son being lucky, what is he going to say about me when I share kind of the turmoil that I've been going through? So that was the end of that relationship. There really are adoption competent therapists who've had, very specialized training and bring much better insight. At the time, I felt like, therapy is just not for me. And I journal and I write and I do other things that work for me. But, therapists work for other people. So we all have our path.
Yeah. And find the work and just keep on persisting, Wow. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we bring it in?
Yeah, no, I think, gosh, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
We've gone a lot of places here.
Yeah.
And I know, the narrative that I bring and the topic I speak on ruffles some feathers. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with voicing the counter narrative because I think it needs to be heard. And instead of someone dismissing it, perhaps as an angry adoptee, which I'm not, I really encourage people to really dig deep into things being meant to be or saving a child, who's on the other side of that equation, and what that narrative means for them.
So what would you like to call the episode?
I think moving past saviorism into a healthy child-centered paradigm for adoptees. What would you call the episode?
I'm just going to write this down. Moving past saviorism to a child-centered approach. Well, I would put the accent on the. I would put the accent on the second part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say it's about the kids, wasn't it? It's about the kids. Adoption, it's about the kids.
Then it should be, right? Right.
Yeah. So I would be somewhere within that. I don't know whether I'd put saviorism in the title. I'll give it some.
Yeah.
I'll give it some thought. I might make it even into how to focus on. I'll bring it in because people are looking for that rational approach, aren't they? So I would say, and it isn't about the rationality. It's not about the head. It's about the heart. People think it's about the head. So I would say how to adopt a truly child-centered approach to adoption, and then I'd surprise them with the content about the saviorism.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
It's been fascinating and it's been challenging, and I love it, and I stay curious.
Great, good. Yeah, I keep listening to your episodes, and I enjoy them. Sometimes I speak back to them as they're speaking, but you have a really great range of guests on.
Yeah, trying to keep the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Cool.
Good.
Thank you very much, listeners. See you again soon.